First, let me thank everyone for taking the time to come out on this chilly Saturday morning. First, I'd like to ask you to give our candidates a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. My name is Lynette Lewis, and I am the Director of Lay Activities for this church, Greater Mount Nebo AME Church. And lay means the body of the church. And one of our missions is to inform our community about our community. So we thought it very appropriate to have the candidates express their views as to how they can support our community. I would like to, at this time, bring up the pastor of this great church, Greater Mount Nebo, and he's going to give you a welcome. Reverend Weaver.
Thank you, Lynette. Good morning to all of you. What a great joy to see all of you here on this Saturday morning. And again, let me say welcome to the candidates that are already assembled, and to Lynette for your leadership as far as the Director of Lay Activities for our lay organization here at Greater Mount Nebo, and to Sister Jan Hagee, who is the president of our lay organization. Jan, where are you? I know you're probably already. She's working hard. And let me just say thanks to all of the members of our lay organization here at Greater Mount Nebo. Let me also extend thanks and hearty welcome to the members of the Collective Empowerment Group, specifically our president for the Prince George's County chapter, Reverend Marcellus Buckner. Reverend Buckner, if you'll please stand just so that everybody can see you. There are a number of organizations that are working with us and in concert with us on this Saturday morning. But let me just say again that we're delighted to have all of you here. I think everybody would appreciate the significance of this. First of all, certainly we want to make sure that everybody gets out and votes. Somebody say amen. During the primaries and then, of course, in the general election. But it certainly starts really at this level, getting to become more informed about the candidates. So again, we're delighted that all of you here. Welcome, and again, if there's anything that we can do to make your stay a bit more comfortable while you're here, please let us know. With the members of Greater Mount Nebo that are in the room, just wave your hand or stand. So you see, you've got a number of people. You don't need to necessarily come to me. You can go to see some of them as well. Welcome, glad to have you on this Saturday morning.
Thank you so much, Pastor. At this time, I did want to acknowledge the lay members of Greater Mount Nebo. So if you all don't mind standing, everyone can see the work that has gone behind this forum. Lay members, please stand. Aretha, she was taking a picture. Thank you. We want to make sure that we follow a certain protocol for this forum. So we're going to have you received a copy of the forum rules, but we're going to also have them expressed to you again. And one of our members, Carolyn Johnson, is going to come up and share them with you.
Good morning, everyone. We want everything to be done in decency and in order, so we want to go over the rules for this session. So I will read those to you as you read them as well. We ask candidates and their supporters to refrain from passing out materials inside of the sanctuary. Campaign materials may be placed on the literature table outside in the lobby, and I think most of you have done that. If any of others of you have materials, you can place them on that table. Campaign materials may not be placed on cars or signs placed on the grounds. So we ask that you would adhere to that. We're asking each candidate to appear in person, and it looks like you're here. and at the time slotted for your presentation, and no stand-ins are permitted. During the break, candidates and supporters will not be allowed to solicit support from participants in the audience. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 1 minute for a closing statement after the question and answer session. Time limits will be strictly enforced, and we have a group of women from the League of Women Voters who will be actually doing the time, be the timekeepers, and I will give you their names in a minute. The timers will give the candidates a 30-second warning and a signal when their time has ended. To keep things moving, we also ask that candidates use one of the table microphones at the place on the table, at your place on the table, when delivering opening and closing statements. The order of speaking will be by alphabetical order. The candidate who makes the first opening statement will make the last closing statement. Only written questions will be accepted. Cards for writing questions will be distributed to the audience before the forum. Succinct questions should be addressed to all candidates. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer the questions. A League of Women Voter question screener will review submitted questions in order to avoid duplications and provide a diversity of questions, ensure readability, and avoid inappropriate questions such as various attacks or irrelevant questions, such as a policy question for a particular race. In order to maximize the time for candidates to answer questions, we will ask the audience to avoid expression of support or opposition to any candidate during the presentation time or answers to questions. Disorderly participants in the audience will be escorted out of the venue, and we are pretty sure we will not have that problem today. This is a forum to hear and question the candidates. It is not planned as a debate between opposing candidates. Thank you so much. Oh, the names of the timekeepers are Odessa Scott, Deborah Mitchell, and Diane Williams. And we have another one, Atari Mohammed. I don't believe she's here today, but she will be here later. Thank you. She's here, okay. Thank you so much.
And I forgot to give the name of Joyce Starks, who's the president of the League of Women Voters, who will be screening the questions for us. And I also want to share with the campaign chairs that it looks like the elected officials and the press are not here yet, so you may take that second row that you're good? Okay, thank you. Now we'd like to have the introduction of the moderators, who I'm so excited about. By Mr. Roy Jones.
Thank you. Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing the moderators at today's forum. Latrina Antoine. Latrina Antoine is the DC editor for the Washington Afro-American newspapers, which provide coverage for Washington, DC and its suburbs, including Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Howard County, and Northern Virginia. Ms. Antoine has written news articles on congressional policies, the accounts receivable industry, and various other subjects and communities. She also teaches in the Mass Communication Department at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. Ms. Antoine received a master's degree in strategic public relations from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and a bachelor's degree in English with concentration in Africana Studies, creative writing, and women's and gender studies from College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. The Reverend Charles Brown, born and raised in Baltimore City. Reverend Brown is a two-time graduate of Howard University, as well as Princeton Theological Seminary. Having begun as a son in ministry of Bishop John Richard Bryan, Reverend Brown has served as an associate minister in AME churches up and down the East Coast. Currently serves as an associate minister here at Greater Mount Nebo AME Church in Bowie. And later this year will celebrate 30 years in ministry. For the last 10 years, he has worked in federal politics as a legislative assistant for Congressman Danny Davis and Senator Roland Burris, as a lobbyist for Teach for America, and as a senior political advisor for U.S. Congressional candidate Eric Cage, out of the 5th District of Virginia. His passion is the nexus of the Black church and social justice, empowering Christians to critically speak truth to power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Joins. This time, our moderators are going to take over and introduce the candidates, and then the questions will begin. After the first 6 questions by our screening committee, we'll have a short break, and the ladies' rooms are on that side of the church, and the men's are on that side. The break will end in about 8 minutes, and you'll hear that cowbell again to bring you back to order. Our candidates are welcome to go back to the break room and have some refreshments during the break. Then we will have questions from the audience. So please make sure you raise your hand so your questions can be collected and screened. At this time, moderators, thank you.
Good morning. I will introduce our first candidate today, Mr. Anthony Brown. Raised in a household dedicated to serving others, Mr. Brown served as colonel in the United States Army Reserve. His distinguished military career spanned for more than a quarter century when he toured in Iraq and held positions including aviator and JAG officer. Brown is a recipient of the Bronze Star. He was first elected in 1998 to the Maryland House of Delegates to represent Prince George's County. He served as vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee and as majority whip. Mr. Brown also served 8 years as lieutenant governor for Maryland. In addition to his efforts to improve Maryland's schools and strengthen the state's economy, Mr. Brown has championed issues including protecting victims of domestic violence, encouraging and recruiting families to become foster and adoptive parents, and expanding employment and health services to veterans, among others. Mr. Brown is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School. He and his wife, Carmen, along with their 3 children, reside in Prince George's County. The next candidate I will introduce is Mr. Warren Christopher. Mr. Christopher is a single father of 2 daughters. He is also a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. He has served on tours throughout the Asia-Pacific region, the Middle East, Europe, Oklahoma, Virginia, Hawaii, and Washington, D.C., receiving numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit Award and the United Nations Medal, among others. Mr. Christopher has commanded with distinction multiple overseas military deployments, managing and directing all facets of business administration and logistics in joint and combined military and civilian environments. Mr. Christopher received a bachelor's degree in political science and pre-law from Purdue University. He also received a master's degree of military science, strategy, and policy from the Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia. Mr. Christopher is currently pursuing a doctorate in strategic management at Georgetown University and is the owner and CEO of Black Boys Strong, a nonprofit focused on providing wraparound services to boys in underserved communities.
Glenn Ivey. Having graduated with a BA in politics from Princeton University with honors and a JD from Harvard Law School, Mr. Ivey began his career in public service as a senior aide to U.S. Congressman John Conyers Jr., then worked as a federal prosecutor in D.C. under Eric Holder, and then after that returned to Capitol Hill to work for Senator Paul Sarbanes and then Senator Democratic leader Tom Daschle. Serving 2 terms as Prince George's County State's Attorney, he helped to reduce crime to record lows, developed a specialized domestic violent unit that worked with faith leaders to support survivors and enact tougher sentences for abusers. He partnered with the faith and business communities to pioneer training and employment opportunities for ex-offenders and initiated an award-winning economic crimes unit that became a regional model for prosecuting mortgage fraud and other economic crimes. He also prosecuted and won convictions of cops charged with using excessive force in Prince George's County. Currently, he serves as chair for the Maryland Legal Services Corporation, which provides funding for legal services to low-income clients across the state. He is a partner at the law firm Leftwich and Luttaway and has lived with his wife, former Maryland delegate Jolene Ivey, and their 6 children in Prince George's County for over 27 years. Jocelyn Pena Melnick. Born in the Dominican Republic, Jocelyn moved to New York, became a citizen in 1983, and was the first in her family to earn a college degree. After receiving an undergraduate degree from Buffalo State and a JD from the State University of New York at Buffalo, she pursued a successful legal career. She has represented both Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties in Maryland's General Assembly since 2007. During her tenure, Jocelyn has sponsored legislation to increase the Maryland minimum wage and expand opportunities for minority businesses. As a current member of the Maryland House of Delegates, Jocelyn is active in the Maryland Women's Caucus. She chairs the Public Health and Minority Health Disparities Subcommittee and is a proud member of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland, Women Legislators of Maryland, and founded the Maryland Latino Legislative Caucus. She is married to Markian Melnick and has 3 children in Prince George's County's Eleanor Roosevelt High School.
Mr. Terrence Strait was born in Michigan and is the oldest of 3 children. After graduating high school, he served in the United States Army and earned a certificate in Arabic from the Defense Language Institute in California. Mr. Strait went on to earn his bachelor's and master's degrees in psychology from the University of Alabama. Mr. Strait has lived in many places across the country and experienced difficult financial situations, including unemployment and living from paycheck to paycheck. Mr. Strait's experience has made him intimately aware of the struggles facing Americans today. He realizes that the government has to stop crisis-to-crisis management and plan for a sustainable future that includes everyone. Okay, to begin the forum, we will address the first question to Mr. Brown.
Good morning, church. Feels like we're in church here. Want to thank Pastor Weaver. I see the First Lady of the church is here as well. Thank you not only for sponsoring us, hosting us this morning, but for your spiritual ministerial leadership in the community. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and all of the sponsoring organizations for hosting this morning. And thanks to each and every one of you for coming out at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. This is our 4th candidate forum. It's really exciting to see that you're participating in the democratic process. I'm Anthony Brown, and I'm running for Congress. I'm a first-generation American. My parents came to this country, my father out of poverty in Kingston, Jamaica, my mother from Switzerland, And they came, like so many new Americans, for a better way of life for themselves and their family, and to make a contribution to the greatness that is this country. My father went to medical school, was a doctor, didn't live in the wealthiest household. We got along well, though. My father served in some of the poorest neighborhoods and hospitals near where I grew up. I wanted to be just like my father. Didn't go to medical school, went to law school, but committed myself to service. I'm running for Congress because I love this country and I love this state. I'm running for Congress because we have great communities in Prince George's and Anne Arundel County. But I'm running for Congress because we have to strengthen our communities. And by doing so, we'll support and strengthen our families. We'll strengthen our communities when we create greater economic opportunities for more. That's good family supporting jobs. It's raising the minimum wage. It's protecting Social Security and Medicare for seniors. We'll strengthen our communities when we create greater educational opportunities, universal pre-K, more investments in career technology education, supporting the President's tuition-free community college initiative. And we will strengthen our communities when we provide safer neighborhoods throughout our communities, not through arrest and incarceration, but through education and opportunity. I can't do it alone to get to Congress. I can't do it alone in Congress. So today I ask you not only for your vote, but for your support.
Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? You all, I'm retired Colonel Warren Christopher, Pastor Weaver, and to all of the members of this great church, and of course to all of you, thank you very much for being here. You all, we got some serious challenges facing us, and I didn't come to bring you doom and gloom, I came to bring you hope. I retired from the Army in 2011, and I served as the Chief of Staff at the Department of the Interior in charge of business enterprise for the federal government. You have to pay attention to us. We are interviewing right now because you're the boss, and we want you to hire us. So I ask you to please pay attention to the results. If what we're touting, if the results are there, then I ask you to say okay. But if what we're touting and you don't see the results, then hold us accountable. At some point, we have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. I enlisted in the Army in 1986, and I served for 25 years, and I didn't quit on you. I retired, and I became the Chief of Staff at the Department of the Interior, led business enterprise for the federal government, more than $57 billion in procurement and acquisitions, and I didn't quit on you. I raised my two daughters, the greatest gift that God has ever blessed me with. I raised them. My oldest daughter is a small business owner, and she attended Morgan State University. My youngest daughter, she's in her third year at Hampton University. I raised those two young ladies, and I didn't quit on you. This is about making sure that we have a servant leader in Congress. And that's what I'm doing, seeking to be your servant leader. A representative in Congress is responsible for three major things. Number one in my mind is constituent services, to make sure you have access and opportunity to me, not just to show up when it's time to vote. The next thing is to introduce legislation that is in the best interest of this district, like a Senior Protection Act for our seniors, like expungement for our nonviolent criminals, to make sure that women get access and opportunity in the corporate world and in national security, to make sure that we're eliminating interest rates on student loans for our students, to make sure that we are creating good paying jobs in cybersecurity and green technology and natural gases and wind energy and solar energy. It is to make sure that our veterans get access and opportunity and that we are getting them off the street. Thank you very much.
Good morning, church. Good morning, Pastor Weaver, First Lady, Reverend Buckner. It's great to be back here at Greater Mount Nebo. My name's Glenn Ivey. I'm the former state's attorney for Prince George's County. I'm running for Congress. But let me start where I started, which was Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I was born there, I was raised there for part of my life. Both of my parents are from Rocky Mount. We used to live across the street from Booker T. Washington High School, so you know what side of town we lived on, and it was still segregated. This was the 1960s. And one of the things that got me interested in public service was the impact of the civil rights movement, because I could cut on the TV and see Dr. King and the civil rights leaders, and then I could look outside, and all of a sudden we could go to the swimming pool, or we could try on clothes downtown, or they integrated the schools eventually, and we were able to go to different schools. So I saw the difference that a movement could make, and I wanted to be one of the people that was part of that. And my parents were involved in that too. My mother worked in the North Carolina public schools, and later when we moved up to Virginia, she was in the schools there too. 40 years as a public servant. My father worked in manpower. Well, first he was a brick mason, then he joined the Air Force, went to school on the GI Bill, came out from Shaw, she went to Virginia State, and got the job, moved us up to the DC area. So that's how I got grounded in public service. I lived it. It made a difference in my life. You heard about me going to Princeton and Harvard Law School. That's not just because of me. It's because people that made a difference in our community and in the leadership and in the movements that helped give me those opportunities, and I'm thankful for that. So I want to have a chance to try and turn that around and give back to other people as well. So when I got elected state's attorney, oh yeah, we prosecuted violent criminals, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons we had 30-year lows in violent crime after I left office, was because we worked with the police and brought crime down, but we also did intervention and prevention programs that made a difference too. So for first-time nonviolent offenders, we tried to send them to drug court. We tried to send them to programs that would keep them out of jail, get them back on the right track, because we know incarceration alone won't do it right. I look forward to having the chance to discuss more of what we're going to do moving forward, and I thank you for putting on this forum today, and thank you for coming out this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, and I'm running for Congress to represent you. For the last 9 years, I've been representing the families in Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County, because the 21st District is 2 counties, just like the 4th. I know the struggles of the families in this district. I come from the Dominican Republic. I came here with my mom when I was 8. My mom was a single mom with my sister and I. She didn't even study to the 3rd grade, but she would always say education is important. I remember her being on welfare, being on Section 8, being on food stamps. I remember going to the office with her to help her translate. She always said, Jocelyn, and education is going to make a difference. I went on to college, went on to law school. I decided I wanted to serve my community. I became a public defender. Then later on, I was a lawyer for children that were abused physically, sexually. Then I got burned out, and I decided, okay, I'm going to go work with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I went and worked with Eric Holder. He was my boss. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I was able to prosecute those that committed serious crimes and give those that deserve a break so they wouldn't have a record, give them a chance as well. After a while, I decided I'm going to run for office. And I ran for the city council in College Park. Then I went on to the General Assembly, where I've been there for 9 years. For 9 years, I have taken on big corporations. For 9 years, I've been fighting for the people in this district. I voted to ban assault weapons. I co-sponsored and voted for minimum wage. When you call my office, I am there for you. I pick up the phone. I email you. I go to the hospital. I go to a nursing home. That is the energy and passion that I will bring to you if you allow me to serve you. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming here this morning. I know it started kind of early. I don't have the history that a lot of the other candidates up here have. What I'm running on instead is ideas. Because I think everyone knows that we have a broken system right now. A broken economic system that privileges the very rich at the expense of everyone else. A broken healthcare system where 29 million people are uninsured and millions more who have insurance still avoid going to the doctor because they can't make their co-payments. We have a broken political system where big money basically is buying elections. And a lobbying system where lobbyists write legislation, which is then introduced by members of Congress and then voted on by people who don't even read what they're passing. We have a Congress that's engaging in crisis-to-crisis governance, where we go to October and we don't know if we're gonna have a budget for that year. So I have kind of a bigger picture, more long-term viewpoint, which I would like to bring to Congress, because that's obviously a voice that's currently missing. I don't think we should be planning year to year. I think we should be planning what's going to happen 20, 30 years out as a result of the policies we pass today. One thing that's really big for me is every time the minimum wage argument is raised, Somebody will say, well, if we raise the minimum wage, those jobs get automated. Well, those jobs are going to get automated anyway, and we need to have a conversation about what we're going to do when that happens. We need to have a real conversation about how we're going to protect the environment. Not just, stand up and have the nice rhetoric, but actually act. We shouldn't have any more cities like Flint. And the fact is, those cities exist across the nation where people have unhealthy levels of lead in their body because we're not maintaining our infrastructure, because we're not protecting our environment, and we need to do better at all of that. Thank you.
Okay, now I will address the first question to Mr. Brown. School reform efforts in other places create trends that could impact public schools in Prince George's County. Towards the end, what are your ideas on vouchers and charter schools in the Washington, D.C. area?
Sure, plain and simple, I oppose vouchers. I do not support any effort that's going to divert funds from our public schools to private schools, number one. On charter schools, we have a charter school program in Maryland right now. Most of the charter schools are in the city of Baltimore. We've had some in Prince George's County. Some have done well, and a lot of them have failed. I don't think that there's clear empirical data that charter schools are the way forward. If we are going to have charter schools, they need to be held to the same standards of accountability as our traditional public schools. I don't think that we should be using charter schools. You can't applaud now. No applause now yet. I think it's to the same standards. Look, every child deserves a world-class education. And what are we going to do to provide that? We've got to make sure that we increase federal aid to education. The NEA has done a study, and the federal government is underfunding our schools by about 73% over the 2010 baseline. That money goes primarily to Title I schools and to students with special needs. This federal government is supposed to fund students with special needs at a 40% level, and they're not doing that. We have more than our fair share of students living in families living in poverty that go to Title I schools, and we're being underfunded. When I go to Congress, my top priority is to increase federal aid to education so that this way our county executive doesn't have to wrestle with the issue of trying to raise the property tax by 14%.
In this order. If it's not public education, I'm not a supporter and I'm not an advocate, because I believe that, like my daughters that are in public schools or did attend public schools, it's not just rhetoric. If you're talking about public schools but your children are not in public schools, then you got to pay attention to that. So when it comes to charter schools, we know actually that 67% of charter schools fail. They're not even performing at the same level of public schools. That's number one. And when it comes to vouchers, if you can afford to send your child to a school and you need a voucher, but don't take away any money from the public education system. Now let's be clear. You're going to hear a lot of talk about what the federal government is supposed to do about education. Education is controlled by the state. 90% of the funding for education in the system comes from the state. Now, yes, there are some federal responsibilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Act, supposed to be funded at the 40% level. There's also Title I funding that goes to a school, but everybody in the school is benefiting from it, but not the people that need it the most, those Title I students that need it the most. But then you also have to make sure that you're paying attention to other requirements. We are testing our kids too much. We have to, I believe, eliminate testing and put wraparound services in our schools. We have to make sure that our schools, our children, and our teachers have the resources that they need to be successful. We have to also make sure that we're leveraging technology. I would like to see virtual reality technology in our classrooms so our kids can use the technology, they can leverage the technology to learn the best way they can. A couple of weeks ago, our children were out of school for an entire week. In my opinion, just like we stream to come to church, just like we stream or we go online to watch, do a meeting, every student should have a smart device. So in the event that a school is out for inclement weather, you can still conduct classes using that smart device. So that's what this is about, making sure that we get access and opportunity. Yes, the federal government has a responsibility, but it's in the state. And if you can't bring the money home from the state, how are you going to go to Congress and bring it home from the federal government. Thank you.
I'm a public school product. Jolene went to public schools. My kids, if you add it all up, I think they went to like 50, 60 years of public schools because I got so many, not because they were repeating, just I got so many kids. But we understand what's going on with the schools from a firsthand experience. And a couple points. One, I certainly agree that the voucher approach is not the right way to go because it diverts funds away from the public schools. And we got enough of a funding challenge as it is. So we don't want to be siphoning money off. Charter schools are an option we want to try, but many of them do fail. So I think the key focus isn't so much traditional charter voucher, it's good schools and bad schools. I mean, is the bottom line. And the challenge here, especially in Prince George's County, is we got a lot of schools that are not up to snuff. I'll be point blank about it. And my kids have gone to some of those schools, so I know it firsthand. We need teachers who are really committed to the job, and one way to do that is to make sure we're paying them enough. You know, these school teachers, it's one of the most underfunded professions in the country right now. And we've got kids now coming out of college that don't want to become teachers because it doesn't pay enough. And they've been playing with their retirement and pension, not just here in Maryland, but across the country. We've got to make sure we give them that commitment so that when they come and make the commitment, because it's a tough job, we're going to make sure that we've got them covered on the compensation side on the back end. Second piece, funding for public schools. We do need an increased federal commitment to public schools. The federal government spends trillions of dollars on all kinds of stuff. Is there anything more important than public education? So we got the county executive trying to struggle to find ways to pay. Just go visit some of these schools. You know, the bathrooms are broke down, you got holes in the walls, stuff like that. That's ridiculous, that's unacceptable. There should be funding to help do it. The federal government needs to help because it's not just Prince George's County struggling with funding, it's jurisdictions across the country. If we're serious about education, everybody talking about the children in our future and education is the path, we need to put our money where our mouth is. And that's the place that we should start.
Thank you. I do not believe in voucher and I will not support it. Charter schools in the state of Maryland are allowed, but they should come under the Board of Education. They should abide and respect the same rules that public schools do as well. But we should put our resources into public schools because that is the key. And what happens is, for example, at the state level, we appropriate over $1 billion to the public school system in Prince George's County. Now the budget is something like $1.9 billion. It's a big corporation, but it's top heavy. And a lot of the money does not come into the classrooms, into the teachers, okay? So we need to look at that as well. I think that we need to focus on spending more money on pre-K. Studies show that if we put the resources into pre-K, our kids do quite well. And also, we need to look at the disparities in the different jurisdictions in Maryland, because most of the per pupil, the funding is based on your taxes, your property taxes. So what happens if you come from a poor area? It does not make sense. And this is where the federal government can come in and make sure that there's some balance as well. I have 3 kids. My kids presently are all at Prince George's Public School at Roosevelt. My husband and I go through this every single day. I have first-hand experience. We are presently dealing with our son, who is a senior. How are we going to pay for college? Those are real issues. And having a great education has made a difference for him because he has choices. But not everybody has choices. And not everyone has the tools at home to make sure that they do their work and that they're prepared. And we have big disparities in our communities, especially our communities of color. And our funding should go to those communities. Thank you.
I don't think you're going to hear a lot of disagreement up here on this topic. I think we're all big supporters of public schools. I went to public high school myself in Indiana. And in the city I was from, we had 2 high schools. One, and I was lucky enough to go to the same high school as the rich part of town. So we had the nicest high school, big atrium, 5 foreign languages. But if you went across town to the other high school, it was hard to believe it was the same country, let alone the same city. It was a rundown building. I think they had a Spanish class, and that was it in terms of foreign languages. But the students at that school who were in the same city as me had a vastly different educational experience. And I think one of the big problems we have is we need to decouple our education system from property taxes, because that's one of the things that's currently forcing children from poor families to have these really subpar educational experiences. I'm a big fan of learning from other countries, and Finland a while back decided they were going to fix their educational system. They didn't want to have the best educational system in the world. They just said every one of our kids is going to have the same access to a quality education. So that's how they approached the problem. They said, we are going to give our kids equity. And when they did that, the result was that they had the best educational system in the world. Consistently, year after year, they come out on top. So I think if we work together and we say, you know what, there are some states that are not holding up their end of the deal. If you look at Kansas, Governor Brownback cut education funding so much that the kids there, they get an extra couple weeks of summer vacation because the schools are running out of money. So I think that's something that we need to work together on and make sure all of our kids, no matter where they live, have equal access to a good education. Thank you.
This next question is directed first to you, Mr. Christopher. What is your position on gun control legislation?
Absolutely. Just like the First Amendment, where you can have the right to free speech, there are limitations on that. You can't come in a church or you can't go into a theater and yell bomb. So there's some limitations on the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, I've used these weapons of mass destruction. I've used them on the battlefield, and those weapons should not be in our communities. AK-47s have no place in our communities. And so like the First Amendment, I am not opposed to anyone using or having or possessing weapons. But we must have responsible gun ownership and gun control. And the other piece to it is I absolutely believe, because so many people in our community, not making excuses, but people don't have their needs met. And when they don't have their needs met, they lose hope. And then they turn to violence. They turn to guns. And so we have to make sure that we're meeting people's needs. We have to take the stigma away from mental health. We have to invest more in mental health and training and counseling, not just for certain people, but for our entire community. And I believe that the faith community has a responsibility to help take that stigma away from mental health counseling, mental health training, to make sure that we are getting the resources that we deserve. The other piece is that we have to make sure that we are holding people accountable, not just people that use guns violently. We have to hold police accountable. I also believe that, like mental health requirements for people who access guns, police should also go through a mental health counseling process to make sure that they are performing and doing the work that they're supposed to do. And so that's where I stand on gun control, responsible gun ownership, but these AK-47 and these assault rifles have no business and no place on our streets. And that's where I stand, and I want to support that when I get to be your servant leader in Congress. Thank you.
When I was a federal prosecutor downtown, it was in D.C. at the height of the crack wars. So that was 450 to 500 homicides every year. I mean, it's hard to remember now, but it was like 2 people getting killed every day. And we had numbers like that out here in Prince George's too, 150 to 200. And so I had a chance when I was prosecuting those cases as a line assistant, and you're meeting with the family, or they're bringing in the guy that got shot and he's in a wheelchair now with the bag so he can use the bathroom. And you just see the tremendous, devastating impact that those weapons have on the street. And it's not just AK-47s. In fact, most of the guns where these shootings are used for crimes that are committed here in Prince George's downtown or wherever, those are Tech 9s, they're semi-automatic handguns. So we need a comprehensive approach to it. We need to start at the Supreme Court. The Heller opinion was the one, Scalia wrote it, I believe, that said, we're going to let guns almost everywhere. We're going to expand it so people can get it. Well, guess what? He's not there anymore. And President Obama is about to appoint somebody who's going to have a chance to fill that slot. It might not get through, but making sure that the next president is a Democrat so they can replace that Supreme Court spot with a Democrat who's going to be open to things like gun control and campaign finance reform, that's critical, because you can't fix it without help from the constitutional piece. Secondly, we need legislation, and there's been some push, especially here in Maryland, to restrict firearms like AK-47s. But the impact has to be on the street, too, with the outreach. The faith community, the things that we did here in Prince George's County, the outreach to the street, real quick. They go to a club. Somebody shoots somebody else on Friday night. What's going to happen on Saturday? The guy from this group, he was going to want to shoot that guy. Intervention programs where you say, they call them disruptors, and we tried to bring it here to Prince George's and it had an impact. Go find these guys. You need former gang members or whatever. That's where the reentry piece comes in. Go interrupt it, and that's how you stop the cycle of violence. We need to do more of that along with the gun control piece.
Look, my youngest client when I was a public defender was 10 years old, and he got a gun from the street. And he went up to an elderly woman, and he asked her, "Give me your purse with a gun." All right? As a prosecutor, I met the victims, and it breaks your heart. As a Maryland State delegate, I was part of a small group that the speaker put together where we met and we made recommendations in Maryland. And Maryland passed historic legislation to ban assault weapons. We were one of the first states. And I voted for it, so did you, Jolene. I voted for it, I fought for it. I'm on record as supporting gun legislation, very strong record, because I know the impact that guns can have on your life. I know in my family what happened to my sister's, the father of her kids. He was shot and killed. So I know that they have devastating consequences and that we need to not just speak on it, we need to have actions. And that when we pass these laws, we need to have background checks, that we need to fingerprint, and that the states need to communicate with each other to see who's getting these licenses, that we need money for behavioral health. The law that we passed in Maryland put money in there for behavioral health because it's very important. Mental health is very important. That we need money for our kids to keep them off the streets. That we need to keep them busy. That we need money for vocational schools, for more after-school programs, because that's where it starts. And I'm on record as supporting all of that. Thank you.
A lot of good points have been made so far, but one thing that I want to just clarify really quick is when people talk about the need to address mental health, people who are mentally ill are far more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators. Where we need to address mental health is suicides make up 2/3 of gun deaths in this country. It is easier if you are in the depths of depression to go out, buy a gun, and kill yourself than it is to get the help you need. And that's something that we need to address, both in terms of access to the care and, like was mentioned, removing the stigma. Because there is a stigma when you go and try and seek help. This is something that I have experience with. I've gone through depression while I was active duty, and the stigma is a lot worse there. But getting the help you need is important. You don't want anybody who is driven to such a desperation that they feel the need to go out and get a gun to end their life. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is there are a lot of gun deaths that are treated as tragic accidents, and we don't treat them in a criminal way. When people leave loaded guns just where anybody can get them, and you have a toddler get their hands on a gun and shoot a sibling or shoot a parent, we're like, oh my God, what a tragedy, but there's nothing we can do about it. We talk about, responsible gun ownership. That's not responsible gun ownership, and we need to address that. When you have people who, have the gun at their bedside to deal with intruders, but they don't bother checking who the intruder is before they shoot. So you have these stories of parents shooting their kids, and oh my God, what a tragic accident, but we don't do anything about it. These are preventable deaths that we need to start having a conversation about. And I'm not sure what we can do in terms of legislation, but we can at least start having that conversation. There are a lot of other things that have already been raised, and I'm a big supporter of making sure we have responsible gun laws. Thank you.
My position on gun control, the numbers are staggering. It's not about the numbers. It's not about another death in another family, in another neighborhood, on another day. There is no family that's immune from the violence of guns in our neighborhoods. In 2008, my cousin Kathy was shot and killed by her estranged boyfriend in front of 2 Montgomery County police officers, who in turn killed him. No family is immune, and no father should have to bury his 40-year-old daughter who all she wanted to do was to be a school teacher and teach her kids. But that happens every day in every neighborhood to every family. So when that happened in my family, I stood up with the advocates against domestic violence, said, what can we do? We passed a law, we gave judges the authority to order abusers to surrender firearms, and the number of domestic violence homicides by firearms have gone down in the state of Maryland. But we still have work to do. We've got shootings and killings in Prince George's County, Baltimore City, and throughout this state. And in the wake of Newtown, Connecticut, finally we woke up in Maryland and passed some common sense gun control. Background checks, fingerprinting, training to reduce straw purchases, more aid to mental health services. But that's not enough. And that's why I'm going to Congress, because Maryland can't fix it alone. Not if Virginia's not doing it, not if Pennsylvania's not doing it, because they'll come right into our communities with illegally purchased guns. I'll take on the NRA. I'll take on the Republicans. I'll go to Congress. We'll do in Congress what we did in Maryland, and we'll make safer communities throughout this country. I can't do it alone. We got to do this together. It's tough work, but everything we talk about today is tough work. So we got work to do. Let's go down to Washington. Let's fix it at the national level.
The next question will be addressed to Mr. Ivey. What is your position on domestic violence, and what are some programs and initiatives that you support that can help deter the devastating effects on our community?
Domestic violence is one of the most corrosive crimes in the community, because a lot of times what it does is it creates, it bends the twig. And so a lot of times you have kids that grow up, the people we were talking about a minute ago who were shooters, frequently they grow up in homes where there was domestic violence, where they're survivors of domestic violence, child abuse of some kind. So it's critical to reach out and make sure we're getting to it at the root. We can't wait till somebody gets shot. We need to try and do it early. So some of the programs that I pushed, in fact, one of them we launched right here. It was called Project Safe Sunday. And Pastor Weaver was kind enough to open up the church for us to help us do it. And when we started this, there were a lot of churches that didn't want to participate. His leadership and involvement made other pastors in the county feel comfortable moving forward with this. So we had pastors say, look, speak to your congregations on a Sunday. Bring up the issue of domestic violence. We had literature to give out, so if you're suffering, you don't have to suffer alone. We gave them emergency numbers to call, and sort of get pastors to feel comfortable speaking about this issue, and more importantly, get people feeling comfortable like they can come to the church to talk about it. This is the one place where you don't have to hide that sort of thing. In fact, you're supposed to bring it here. We also created, when I was state's attorney, a domestic violence unit. So we had prosecutors that specialized in it and focused on it. It was such a big issue for me. I personally prosecuted one of the kids. Remember Yvette Cade, the woman who was set on fire at work? Ex-husband shows up, douses gasoline over her head, and chases her down in the parking lot and sets her on fire. I was so personally upset by that. I got to do this case myself. And the guy got life. And Yvette's become a national advocate to fight this issue. But we have case after case after case like that. And then lastly, we had to go to Annapolis, because sometimes for the minor stuff, you get a conviction, but there was no sentence. And so we went to Annapolis. In fact, Anthony introduced the bill for me the first year. He had to go to Iraq, but then we got it passed the second year. But this was a bill to deal with threats, and it increased the penalty, so when there are threats or low-level domestic violence going on, if we get a conviction, we can actually get some jail time and punish them to deter it. I got to stop, but thank you.
Well, I have to say, I agree with everything Glenn said, and Glenn and I have worked together on some bills, along with Anthony, regarding these issues. I am on record as there was a bill that actually reduced and made it easier for women and people that have been victims of domestic violence to be able to get an order of protection. And believe it or not, Maryland was the last state in the United States to pass that bill. And it was only because the Washington Post shamed Joe Valerio that the bill passed, because we have tried for many years to do that. I also, I've co-sponsored this session of a bill that says that if you're found guilty, when you're being sentenced, the judge must tell you that you can no longer have a firearm if there was a firearm in the household as well. What you might not know about me is that I was a domestic violence counselor. I worked at Haven House in Western New York, which is a shelter for battered women. I remember getting those calls. I remember telling the woman, go to the local Dunkin' Donut, I'm gonna call the police and they'll come and get you. I remember when the police will pick them up and bring them to the shelter. I remember getting diapers and food for them, finding them a lawyer. I believe that we need to put more resources into domestic violence. We have very few resources. It needs to be a wraparound, holistic way, where the woman comes in, she gets counseling, she can get a lawyer, she can get resources, because oftentimes they end up going back because they are attached financially and emotionally. They need to be strong, and we need to give them the resources. We need to teach the kids that witness this, because studies show that when they witness it, they do the same thing. And we need to put a lot of money into education, and it works when we do it. Thank you.
I think it's an important point that physical violence never happens all by itself. Domestic abuse has both physical and emotional components, where people feel like they're trapped in a situation. So there's a term in psychology called learned helplessness, where you get into a situation and you feel like nothing that you can do will make a difference. And I think when we are talking about putting resources in place,
We need to address both of those issues. We need to address both the physical and the emotional violence. I read a story recently, this was down in Florida, where a woman and her child were being held hostage, and she put an order in for pizza and a note on that in the comments saying, hostage, 911 help. And so that the person working at that pizza parlor was able to call the police and send help. But that's very often a problem, where the people who are in these abusive situations need a way to covertly get help. And I have a little bit of experience with this. When I was in high school, one of my friends was abused by both of his parents, and he wanted help to get emancipated so he could get away from his family, because it was a very bad situation. So I was going with him, and kind of going to see a lawyer. So we went down to the city hall and kind of saw about the process. Unfortunately, his parents caught up to us there. And so it was me and him and his girlfriend, and they just kind of showed up and pulled him away. And that was a very traumatic experience for me. That was made worse about an hour later. So his girlfriend and I kind of drove around calming down. I brought her home, and then I got home, and I found out that his parents had called my parents to tell them that I had attacked his mother. And of course, my parents believed them for some reason. But we have to have resources available not just for spouses who are being abused, but also for children, so we don't have things like that happen.
Let me do what I have the opportunity to do on many Sunday mornings, and I want to thank Pastor Weaver, because he has given me the opportunity to do this from this very pulpit. If we're going to reduce and eliminate domestic violence, we need to educate the public about the resources and the services that are available. And you've heard a lot of them. It's now easier to get a protective order. My cousin Kathy couldn't get a protective order because when she got advice about getting it, they said, well, it's he said, she said, because you had to show by clear and convincing evidence. Now it's a preponderance of the evidence. So when it's he said, she's going to get the protective order today. So please tell the people in your lives who you think are the victims of domestic violence, get that protective order. Paper doesn't protect because a bullet can go through it, but that protective order is important. Why? Because, for example, my cousin Kathy was killed by a man that she worked with. We recently passed a law in Maryland that says you don't have to choose between safety and your job. Someone with a protective order can now get unemployment compensation if they have to leave their job because of the fear of domestic violence. Tell the people that you know about that. If you live in an apartment building, we changed the law. You can now break your lease and walk away from the apartment without losing your security deposit. Your landlord cannot kick you out of your apartment because of domestic violence, saying, oh, there's too much disruption in that apartment, you've got to leave. No, I'm the victim of domestic violence. I got a protective order that protects you in that apartment. You need your locks changed, you go to your landlord. Within 48 hours, your landlord has to change the locks. We've done so much. I don't stand here to say, oh, I've done this and I've done that, because everyone on this stage has helped do that. But we got to educate and reach out to the public and tell them that there are services. At Prince George's Hospital and now at 9 hospitals around the state, we have domestic violence referral programs and screening programs. So when we go to Congress, what each of us needs to do is fight for increased money for the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, which Joe Biden started years ago as a senator, because it's that program that funds everything that we've been talking about. That's what we've got to do when we go to Congress.
You know, growing up in Alabama, raised by my grandmother, unfortunately, I saw my aunts get brutally battered by their husbands. You all, when we talk about this is a very serious issue, and it's especially serious for me because I have 2 daughters. And I would just tell you, God forbid if someone does something to my daughters. I'm just going to keep it real with you. God forbid. You all, I really appreciate all the work that they talk about they've done. You all, we got 1 domestic violence shelter here in Prince George's County, 1, and it only sleeps 55 people. That's not a federal issue. That's a state issue. So where are the resources? Again, pay attention. We can't be up here talking about rhetoric. 1 domestic violence center for 1 million people, 55 beds. You know, I'm not going to call any names, but she runs a center here in Prince George's County. She called me one night, even since I've been a candidate, she called me one night and said, Warren, I really need somewhere to put a family because I can't take them to the Family Crisis Center. I opened up my home to let these women and their children come in. You know, this is very serious, so we can't just pay attention to the rhetoric. This has to be resourced, but then you got to get to the root cause of the issue. Again, back to mental health. People want to control you because there's some underlying issues. People want to take charge of you, and it's not just physical. It's mental. It's degrading. It's abuse by words so they can control you. And so let's make sure that we are using both the funding that we should be getting from the state and to strengthen the Violence Against Women Act. But also, you know, Pastor Weaver, and I've partnered with a number of pastors. You know, if you're getting beat side the head, you know, we can't go to church and then somebody tell you to go back home and continue to get beat side the head. That is unacceptable. So I want to continue to partner with clergy. So when someone is being violated at home, physically or mentally, it's not necessarily a response to go back home and pray about it. You've got to go get some real serious help.
This question is directed to Ms. Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, and it's on jobs. Regarding bringing jobs back to the United States, what are you proposing to do about unemployment, especially among our youth?
You know, we have been offshoring a lot of our jobs because of a lot of the policies that we have been sponsoring. we need to make sure that these corporations that are overseas that are not paying taxes, that we bring them back home so they can invest in jobs here. We need to change our policies regarding our tax code. But in addition, regarding young kids, we need to offer corporations credits so that they're able to offer jobs to these young kids and to people that need opportunity, especially people that live in disadvantaged areas. If you look at the unemployment rate in the US, it's over 5%. In Maryland, it's over 5%. If you look at the 4th district, you look at Prince George's County, Mitchellville, and Bowie, the unemployment rate there, it's like the state, 5%. But if you look at the inner city, Capitol Heights, District Heights, is some areas up to 10%. There is a big difference, and we need to change that. The 4th district is close to the 7th and 8th ward in DC. We need to make sure that we attract some of these big corporations to Prince George's County. Virginia has a lot of them, and Montgomery County has a lot of them. Why is it that Prince George's County cannot have some of those jobs? We're fighting very hard right now to bring the FBI into Prince George's County. Well, we need to bring some of those buildings, more of those federal agencies to Prince George's County because we don't have our share of them. Most of them are in Virginia and Montgomery County. The county government needs to look at their policies and make sure they give incentive to these companies to make sure that they come here. We also need to make sure that we give opportunities to minority businesses so that they can hire people. There are a lot of people in this district that have some real struggles, and we need to start by supporting the right policies. And that's what I would do because I've done it at the state level with procurement law and with MBE laws. Thank you.
When it comes to unemployment, I think we need to look at it holistically. Like there are things that we can do short term, there are things we can do medium term, and we also have to look long term. In the short term, I think the best thing that we can do to reduce unemployment is massive investment in our infrastructure. We have crumbling roads and bridges. We have some of the slowest internet in the developed world for the highest prices. We have an energy infrastructure that is decades old. Our rail is, we all saw what happened with the Amtrak line, and that train was going a lot slower than trains in Europe, for example, and that was too fast because we're not maintaining our infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers has suggested that we need something along the lines of $3 trillion by 2020 to bring our infrastructure up to where it needs to be. I think we all know that's not gonna happen, but that's the scale of the investment that we need to be pushing for. And I think that's a very good source of jobs. Long term, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to see automation. So we can slow that down by trying to encourage companies to bring jobs back here. But manufacturing jobs today are not going to be what manufacturing jobs 50 years ago. Even if we brought all of it back here, a lot of those factories would be automated and we'd see, tens of people where hundreds of people would have been working before. So I think we need to work long term, and this is, decades out, on some kind of basic income. Because there are a lot of things that could be contributing to society that people just don't do because they have to make ends meet. We have people who are, making minimum wage, working 60, 70 hours a week, when maybe they're a great musician and they would love to be teaching kids music, but there's no money in that. So we are losing out a lot as a society by forcing people to meet their basic needs when they could be better spending their time doing other things. People are humans, not machines. Thank you.
While it was a short question, there's a lot packed in there. Jobs overseas, jobs for youth. Let me just see if I can hit it as much as I can, as quickly as I can. First of all, in terms of preventing from jobs going overseas, I'm not going to support any free trade agreement where we see jobs, particularly manufacturing jobs, going overseas. We saw that with NAFTA. We have now a greater trade deficit with Mexico and Canada than before NAFTA. I know the president negotiated the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Labor's got some problems with it. Environmentalists have some problems with it. Consumer groups have problems with it. And if it ships jobs overseas, I've got problems with it. I commend the president for negotiating it, but I don't want to see jobs going overseas. I'm going to fight to increase community development block grants. So that include summer employment opportunities for our youth. We put our youth to work, and I tell you, on the front end, it's going to save us a lot on the back end, because without a job, often these youth end up, instead of on a path to productivity, a path to prison. That's more expensive for them and for us. A few other things on job creation. I think what we need to do, and what we as a member of Congress ought to focus on, is fiscal policy. What do I mean? We've got to spend more money on infrastructure, like the Purple Line, like bringing the FBI building to Prince George's County, like supporting the regional hospital. It creates jobs and opportunities here in Prince George's County. Fiscal policy, what do I mean? We've got so many federal facilities in Prince George's County and Anne Arundel, but if you compare the amount of contracts that go to Prince George's County small minority and women-owned businesses, we're on the low end. You don't have to change the law. Change the leadership, and let's increase opportunities to small minority and women-owned businesses right here in Prince George's County. Fiscal policy, investments in infrastructure, but we also have to prepare those young people. Not all of them are going to go off to the four-year college, but each of them needs something to compete for a family-supporting job. That's why in my opening remarks and in this remark now, I say more investments in career technology education. We used to call it VOTEC.
Thank you. We have to really begin to leverage the opportunities that we have right here. There are opportunities for us to create jobs in energy, and by harnessing wind and solar. There are opportunities, right, to rebuild our infrastructure. But we've got to be thinking about the jobs of tomorrow. And those jobs are in wind and energy. They are in rebuilding our infrastructure. We have to also make sure that in our schools that we're providing the resources for career and technical education programs. My two daughters are a great example. Although Brittany attended Morgan State, Brittany is a small business owner of a hair salon because that's what she loves doing. Ashley is a STEM student, or I like to say STEAM student, because we have to include the arts. So we want to make sure that we're cultivating all of our children, but also we have to make sure that we are lowering the corporate tax rate. A lot of these people here, they talk about what we need to do. They've had the opportunity to do it. Ask us how high our corporate tax rate is, because we've let jobs leave the state of Maryland. Ask what we've done about making sure that we're able to expose our children to public-private partnerships, partnering with the corporations right here in the 4th District or in the state of Maryland. Let's ask what we've done to cultivate and bring home the money under the Perkins Act, which is the federal funding to fund career and technical education training programs. Look, you all, this is very serious. Unemployment in our community, there is a have and have-nots. And at some point, we've got to be sick and tired of the same rhetoric. At some point, we've got to be sick and tired of the same results. When are we going to take back our political power to change the process? Let's create jobs and make sure that all of our community, to include our women, our veterans, and if seniors want or retirees want to go back to work, let's create opportunities in allowing them to go in and assist our teachers as teachers' assistants, so they can go in and help to make sure that we have some level of discipline, that we have some level of order. There are great opportunities for us to create good-paying jobs. We have the National Security Agency here, and we also have the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Command here. Let's leverage that for all of us.
Well, in some sectors, we've got jobs going out, and in other sectors, we've got employees being imported in. So let's talk about jobs going out first. NAFTA and TPP, I opposed them because we've been sending jobs overseas, millions of them. Our whole manufacturing industry almost has been exported. Mexico, Canada, and then next to Indonesia and other countries over there. Those were outstanding jobs, great paying jobs. It used to be middle class jobs here in the United States. People can't make a living on them anymore, at least not in the US, because the jobs on another continent. We've got to stop hemorrhaging these jobs so quickly. And these bills that we've been passing at the federal level are a big part of the problem. What about the employees coming in? Well, if you look at companies like, say, Microsoft or Google, the high-tech jobs, which are not only the jobs of the future, but the jobs of today, the place where we really want people, they're importing people from China, India, and other countries because they have the type of STEM background and education that our kids are falling behind on in our schools, not just public schools, private schools, and universities. We've got to increase the number of our students that are getting that kind of education and are on the engineering and math and technical tracks, or we're going to continue to fall behind. But that will allow us to hire more kids here in the United States and keep more of the money at home. On top of that, the local piece, FBI is definitely important. Getting more federal agencies here is definitely important. Growing the small business sector is critical. As a lawyer in the private sector, those are primarily my clients. The people I represent tend to be, not only, but tend to be small businesses that do work here in the area. And guess what? They're the ones that hire the local people. The kids we've got that need that summer internship, they're more likely to be hired by a local small business person. The reentry programs that we started working in the state's attorney's office, guess what? The people that hired those guys were local small businesses. They weren't the national chains. So we have to do the local piece. We got to take care of our own first. And that's the next step, I think, for the jobs piece. Thank you.
The next question will be addressed to Mr. Strait. What will you propose to do about homelessness, unemployment, and health issues to our veterans?
Thank you. This question is a little bit personal to me because I am a veteran, obviously. But I think a lot of it we can address the larger problem. I mean, veteran homelessness is a tragedy. But when you consider that we have millions of homeless people just across the board, and we have 16 million plus homes that are just sitting vacant, that's an atrocity in my opinion. We should not have anybody living on the streets when we have homes sitting vacant. So that's one thing. I think we can implement some kind of plan where, because a lot of these homes are owned by banks, where during the crash, they foreclosed on homes and kicked families out. And a lot of those homes, the banks will let fall into disrepair, so they're no longer habitable. So one thing that I would like to see us do is force banks that take possession of these homes to maintain them in livable condition, and if they're not willing to do that, they need to turn them over so they can no longer claim them as assets to the Department of Housing and Urban Development so they can fix the houses up and match them with families who need them. On the unemployment piece, I believe, like I mentioned earlier, massive investment in our infrastructure, and we can target that at our veteran communities. We currently have a Veterans Preference Program for federal programs. That helped me get my job at Census. And I think we can continue that with our infrastructure investment. As far as healthcare goes, I am a big fan of the veterans healthcare system. I've been a beneficiary of it, and there are times, I broke my leg a couple years back, and I got my care through the veterans healthcare system. And if I had tried to go through private care, I don't know that I would have ever recovered from that cost because I was a college student at the time, I had no job. So if I had to pay those medical bills on my own, I would have been completely sunk. But I think we need to invest more money in the system because a lot of the waiting periods and other problems we're seeing is because our veterans don't have enough doctors and nurses staffing the facilities that are supposed to be serving them. I mean, we're going off to all these wars and then we're not increasing the funding for the veterans system to take care of them.
By show of hands, how many veterans do we have in the house? Okay, my round of applause to each and every one of you. Thank you for your service to our country. You owe you a debt of gratitude that we'll never be able to fully repay. I want to thank Mr. Strait for your service. I want to thank Colonel Christopher for your service. And for me, it's been a real privilege to have spent 30 years in both active and reserve duty on behalf of this wonderful nation and a year in Iraq. We owe veterans more than we're ever going to be able to provide them. Veterans and their families. We often think about veterans, that man or woman who goes into harm's way in Iraq or Afghanistan, but it's not just that, and Mr. Strait will tell you. It's that veteran at Fort Leavenworth who may not be waking up every day to the idea of having to dodge bullets, but it's a lifestyle that very few of us can endure. It's trying, it's demanding, and it in many cases wreaks havoc on the soldier and their families. So there are a lot of things that we have to do, but I want to get specific on maybe one or two. Disability benefits. We got a broken system. A very high percentage of veterans that apply for disability claims actually receive them, yet we have them wait forever. My proposal is when you submit a disability claim, you will get the disability automatically. And when we process it and we find out that you shouldn't have gotten it, no problem. We'll discontinue, but at no harm to yourself. VA hospital. We got some very well-intended men and women who work in the VA hospital system. It's a great healthcare system. I had the opportunity to co-chair the Obama-Biden transition for the Department of Veterans Affairs back in 2007, 2008. But we've got to reform it, because the system itself can't support the veterans. So I'm willing to support, lead, and pass legislation that gives veterans the opportunities to access non-VA facilities to get the care that they need. So those are some specific proposals I'd like to move forward on.
To all my fellow veterans, thank you very much for your service. Folks, here in Prince George's County, we don't have one veteran homeless facility, not one. And we have thousands of homeless veterans right here in Prince George's County. You know, these troops, they fight on the front line in defense of our nation and our freedom. They fight on the front line to defend our way of life here at home. But they come home to the end of the line when it comes to affordable housing. They come home to the end of the line when it comes to responsive medical treatment. They come home to the end of the line when it comes to making sure that their skills are transferred. You all, we sit in this place today in large part because of the service of our veterans to this nation, and it is selfless. And when they sign on the dotted line, they commit to paying with their life if they have to. So when they come home, it is a shame. We, as a state and as a country, should be ashamed that there are more than 75,000 veterans that are homeless. And I'm not talking about World War II veterans, even though they're just as important, or Vietnam veterans. I'm talking about current day post 9/11 veterans. Again, pay attention to the rhetoric. Where's the services for our veterans right here at the local level? Where's the service? Where are the homeless shelters for our veterans? We don't have any. What I want to do is to make sure that we are partnered with community, that I believe that we have to downsize the VA community hospitals and integrate them into our community hospitals so we can get more federal funding through that process. But I also want to make sure that we're dealing with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. I think that the VA should be a center of excellence, and let community hospitals do the rest. Let's make sure that our veterans get the responsive treatment that they need and they get access to affordable housing. I want to take these federal surplus lands and turn those opportunities into affordable housing for our seniors and for our veterans, and to make sure that we continue to give veterans preference so they can earn a livable wage and have a family that we owe that debt of gratitude to them for. Thank you.
You know, for the last 5 years of his life, Jolene's dad moved in with us and lived with us until he passed. Now, he was a guy, you wouldn't have known it if you asked him about it, because he never really talked much about his military service, but he was a Buffalo soldier in World War II, one of the first to integrate later on, but these were the first African-American combat troops. He came back with a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart. Well, the second one came later, I think. Then he re-enlisted for ground combat in Korea, right? In fact, they were like, wait a second. He went to the Pentagon. They were like, are you sure why don't you take the weekend to think about that? You already did your service. You don't have to, but he did. He went back to Korea, came back with another Purple Heart and another Bronze Star. And so he moved in with us, and he's in his 90s. And he says, Glenn, can you take me to the doctor today? I said, sure. Where are we going? He said, Kaiser Permanente. So we get in the car and we're driving over, and I'm like, well, no, wait a second. Aren't you supposed to be, VA hospital or something? Well, he'd given up on the VA hospitals years ago because it took so long to get the service. You had to wait. You call in for an appointment. We'll see you in next January. It was ridiculous. So he just gave up on it. And thank goodness he came out and volunteered. He was not volunteered, became a public school teacher, so he had that pension and benefits program too. But it was ridiculous to me that he couldn't benefit. And you talk about benefits that were earned. He definitely earned. All veterans earn them, but he definitely earned them. It's got to be a top priority for us to make sure that all veterans get the benefits that they deserve. And it's clear, we saw the VA hospital scandal, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago now. That was appalling and shameful. There's got to be a total commitment. I think the funding has to be dramatically increased for that. We need more doctors, and I'm not opposed necessarily to privatizing some of it, but we can't just we can't export all of those jobs to the private sector, because then they'll disappear. I want to make sure that veterans get the benefits that they earned, and they shouldn't have to give up on them and shortchange themselves on any of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, if you allow me to represent you, this is what I would do and what I've done for 9 years. When that veteran calls my office, and they do often, and they have a hard time making sure that their application is processed, I usually call the federal representative. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I will make government work for that person. I will connect them, make sure that their application is processed. Look, we're up here. There isn't a lot legislatively that we can do with this Congress, because we're going to be the minority. So legislatively, let's be honest, we can do a lot. But can we give excellent constituency service? Absolutely. Can we have an office that has good people that care when that person calls, when they come in? Absolutely. And that is what I have done, and that is what I will do. We just had a bill on the floor that I defended personally this past Friday that does the following. It allows a homeless person in the state of Maryland to go into the MBA and get a certificate of birth for free. Something so simple. Guess why? Because when they go to the local office who's helping them, they need a birth certificate to be able to apply for services. I defended that bill. That bill is going to pass this session. Something so simple. People that serve, thank you so much for doing that. We've done a lot in Maryland, such as preferences for the MBE, for different programs. But the truth is that we need to do more, and that we need to put services. We need to make sure we have funding so that when people come home, they can have health care. They can look into getting care for their mental health, which is so important. Mental health is usually an afterthought. It really is. People do not fund it. There's a saying that says that the money should follow the policy, not the money. The policy should follow the money. And oftentimes we don't do what's right. I always done what's right. I'm not afraid to rock the boat. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, this is the last question before the break. What is your position on the current epidemic of police brutality in our communities, and what are your proposed solutions?
Thank you. Public safety is probably the most fundamental responsibility of government. And if we're going to create safer neighborhoods, we have to improve police-community relations around this country. I think when you look at what we've done in Prince George's County over the last 20 years, we are a model of what can be. I remember when I moved to Prince George's County 25 years ago or so, it seems like either every day, certainly every week, you were reading in the local newspaper about police brutality against someone, somewhere in this county. And we've gone a long way. And why? Because we've done a lot of things, we've been doing a lot of things, many of which you find in President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. Now again, we were ahead of that. What's in that task force recommendations? The things that I support. I support diversifying local law enforcement. The police department needs to reflect the diversity of the community, number one. Number two, we need to demilitarize. When we started winding down our military operations overseas, what did we do with all that excess equipment? We sold it or gave it to local police departments. They don't need that type of equipment. It doesn't foster good police-community relations. Number three, and this is what we've been doing very well in Prince George's County, more community involvement in the recruitment process, in the disciplinary review process, also in establishing the training protocols for law enforcement. Right now in Annapolis, there's a bill. It's very controversial, but there's some good elements to it that I support. Looking at law enforcement, if you've got a history as a member of law enforcement of complaints against you for misconduct, we need to do some psychological evaluations and see if you're still fit to be on the service. We do need to look at and improve police-community relations.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we absolutely must take police through the mental health screening as well. We have to make sure that the police that are working for us and our families and our children, they should be a part of our community. And that's a big part of the problem. Many of our police, they travel in from other communities. They don't know us and we don't know them, which automatically creates an opportunity for tension. You all, I want to share a story with you all. And there's some people up here that knows about this. There's a young man by the name of Mr. White, right here in Prince George's County. Mr. White was killed in police custody. He was killed in police custody, and the crime was not prosecuted. It was not prosecuted, and although we knew that there was a lot of opportunity to prosecute the case, the state's attorney failed to prosecute the case. Now, you go and ask that family of Mr. White. It was alleged that he had, done something. He had an altercation with police officers, but he didn't deserve to die because we have in this country called due process. And so we have to hold people accountable. We can't play favorites with the police officers. We have to hold them accountable, but we also must hold our families and our communities accountable. We have to partner with our faith community to make sure that we are ensuring that there are parenting preparation opportunities in our faith-based community. We have to make sure that not just the police is getting mental health, but we have to hold people that are responsible for prosecuting these cases, we have to hold them accountable as well. And when they don't do what they have an obligation to do, regardless of the relationships based on the evidence, we have to make sure that we are holding them accountable and we're not allowing them to repeat that same cycle of violence. We have to make sure that our elected officials are doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
When I was a kid, we were living in Virginia, and remember the Capitol Center that was here? I always wanted to go see Commodores, Earth, Wind & Fire, whatever. My parents would not allow me to come to the concerts here. And the reason was the Capitol Center was located in Prince George's County. And they were afraid that their son coming to Prince George's County might get hurt by the police. And you know what? They had reason to be concerned. Matter of fact, I've been stopped by cops, almost arrested. I've got 5 sons, they've been stopped too. One got stopped on University of Maryland campus on his first day of school. Hadn't even got to the welcoming center yet, and he got stopped by the police. So we know there's an issue. So when I ran for state's attorney in 2002, I said, you know what? Let's deal with this issue. I want cameras in interrogation rooms because there were a lot of false confessions being taken. People were going to jail for murders that hadn't actually committed them. We need cameras on the squad cars. And guess what? Those things happened. Those were big steps forward. Another big piece was actually prosecuting and convicting cops. We'd had lots of indictments against cops for excessive force. And by that, I mean shooting people. No convictions. Fortunately, when I got to office, we were able to obtain convictions against police officers for using excessive force. One's still in jail. He got 45 years in jail. So we know that working with those issues, and we worked with the police department because Chief High at the time came in, he brought his best investigators in to prosecute, to help us put cases together against these cops, and that's how we were able to obtain the convictions. So you had a commitment from the department, from the state's attorney's office, and from the community that helped to turn these things around. We've got more we can do. I think body cameras make sense. Definitely the move in the right direction. Doesn't cure everything, but I think it's a big step in the right direction. And we are leaders on this issue. If you take a look, if you compare us to other jurisdictions where they can't even get indictments, like in Ferguson or whatever, we are way ahead, and we've proven one thing too. You can have crime go down, Still work with the police and prosecute officers that cross the line. It's not like you got to make a choice. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Thank you.
Look what happened in Baltimore City, right? So why did that happen in Baltimore City? Why did we have the riots? Because people don't have a sense of hope. They feel neglected for many, many, many decades, all right? We have been neglecting Baltimore City. You drive through Baltimore City and you feel like you're in a third world country, like it's a war zone. So what do you think is gonna happen? When you look at the police department, most of the police officers are white, when the community is mostly black. The department should be representative of its citizens. There needs to be a balance. In Maryland, what we did, the speaker chose 5 people from the House, and the Senate chose 5 people from the Senate. I was one of those 5 people. And for 6 months this past year, we traveled throughout Maryland. And we went to all 24 jurisdictions. And we listened to people. And we held hearings. As a result of those hearings, we came up with 23 recommendations. That's the bill that is in Annapolis now, that I'm a co-sponsor of it. What the bill does, it requires more transparency. It requires psychological evaluation for officers when they're tested. It reduces the number of days for the Officer Bill of Rights, where you and I, if we get arrested, we have to talk immediately. They're given 10 days. It reduces the number of days. It creates transparency. It allows you to go to the Citizen Review Board and be present when they're being prosecuted, so that you can listen, you can see what's going on. It makes the process more transparent. And it requires that when a weapon is involved, that you must file that report immediately before you go home and not wait while the facts are fresh. And that is what we're doing in Maryland. I have also supported body cameras, and you can look at my record. I have co-sponsored and I voted for it. And Maryland is pretty progressive regarding those issues. Thank you.
One thing I think that we need to do regarding the police department is look at the culture of the police departments. I think we all know about the code of silence, where police officers won't, talk when other police officers engage in misconduct. And actually, that's one of the easiest ways to see some kind of retribution, is if you report on your fellow officer. I mean, we see that in cases across the country where police officers are getting suspended, not because they did anything wrong, but because they reported wrongdoing. And that's something that's very pervasive. I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, but they took a couple of college students and had some of them put in the role of prisoners and some in the role of guards. And very quickly, they fell into these kind of stereotypical patterns. And it was so psychologically damaging that they had to end the experiment early. So you have people who are in the situation for years. And now that we're militarizing our police forces, it's becoming even more noticeable, where officers aren't looking at themselves as, serving the people, but rather as an occupying force. And you see that, with all these protests, you have police out there in riot gear, like they're, in Iraq. And that's ridiculous to me. So I think that that's one thing that we need to address. Another thing is, when you see that these issues with the dash cams and the body cameras, where you can see very explicitly that there was misconduct, but you have local prosecutors that do not vigorously prosecute their cases, and so you don't get indictments in these cases. I think you have a conflict of interest there, and you need to bring in federal prosecutors, because local prosecutors have to work with those police departments on a day-to-day basis to do their jobs. So in order to expect them to prosecute those same police officers is asking for a bit much. So I think bring in federal prosecutors and you can see that change. Another thing that I don't see is police officers who are filing false reports. You have the video evidence that the report they filed was false. We need to prosecute that as well, and not just the act of violence.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, but before we do take that break, I want to let everyone who's attending know that voter information is in the hallway by the kitchen. You can get the primary voting dates and locations, news on the voting process, and voter registration forms. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And candidates, the restrooms are this way for men, that way for ladies, and then you're going to be escorted by Mrs. Hagee back to the holding room. And we're going to have about 8 minutes break.
Okay, the first question will go to Mr. Christopher. Do you live in the 4th Congressional District? Yes or no? If no, which congressional district do you live in, and who is your congressional representative?
I moved to this, yes, I do. I moved to Prince George's County down in the Fort Washington area a little over 22 years ago. And during my deployments in the military, I deployed, and my military assignments very fortunately brought me right back to Prince George's County, or to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And I've lived and raised my family here since. I live now in Upper Marlboro. I live down in the Fort Washington area. And I am serious about my community. I just personally believe that if you can't vote for yourself, why should anybody else vote for you? Because this is about our issues right here in the 4th Congressional District. And so, you know, when it comes to, you know, the issues that are important to us, you are this district, the 4th Congressional District. This district was created primarily in the early 90s so African Americans could have representation from the state of Maryland and the United States Congress. And I believe, though it's not a state requirement or a federal requirement, I believe that you should live in the district that you are running in, so the votes that you're taking, they impact the people that you are voting for and yourself too. And if that's not the case, I don't think that you should expect a vote from other people that can't vote for themselves. Thank you.
Yes, I live in the 4th Congressional District, and we moved out, what was it, 88? I think it was 1988. So we were in D.C. and ended up buying a house in Mount Rainier, and then we lived there for a while, and then we just out-kidded the house. Too many kids to stay where we were, so then we ended up moving to Cheverly. And it's been a wonderful experience, I must say. I think it's a beautiful community in a lot of ways. We definitely have our challenges. That's why we're in public service. We want to make a difference with those. But we should always take a minute to celebrate some of the wonderful things that are going on here too. You know, in Cheverly, we've got great neighborhoods, great neighbors, people making a difference, kids coming up. You know, the faith community out here has been a real blessing to me. And so I've really enjoyed being here, working in the community, being in the community, and just having fun. It's been a great place to live, and I've really enjoyed it. And I was just talking to somebody who'd gone off to college, Ms. Blakeney, and just came back to live in Prince George's County. We need more of that. We're glad the kids are coming back. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate it. You got it.
Thank you. I do not live in the district. But if you look at the district, look at a map. Go home, look at a map. I live in College Park. My home is like a donut hole. It's surrounded by the 4th district. I've been representing the 21st district, which is both Prince George's and Anne Arundel County, which are the 2 counties that are in the 4th, for 9 years. None of them up here have represented Prince George's and Anne Arundel County for 9 years. The question is, can I do the job? Do I have the commitment to represent you well? Absolutely. Would I answer your call? Absolutely. Would I get out of my bed at 10 o'clock at night like I done and take your problem? Absolutely. Do I know the 4th district? Yes. Did I live in the 4th district? Yes. I lived in Hyattsville for almost 10 years and then moved to College Park when we had our 3 kids because we had a 2-bedroom home and needed more space. Have I lived in Prince George's County for a while? Yes, for 21 years. How many polls do I have that are in the 4th? In my 21st district, 16. I've been representing for 9 years both the 4th and the 5th district. Do I know you? Yes. Do I know your issues? Yes. Would I go and give it my best, absolute best, with passion and commitment to represent you? Yes. Would I fight for Social Security for you? Yes. Would I fight to create more jobs for you? Absolutely. In the federal government, I will. Do I care about education? Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, I do live in the 4th District. I moved here back in 2012 when I was offered a job by the U.S. Census Bureau. I lived in Suitland first, right across from the Suitland Federal Center, and I was there for about a year until I had saved up enough money to buy my own house. So now I live in Capitol Heights, right down from the Addison Metro Station. So I've lived all around the country. Maryland is the 13th state I've lived in, and I'm not all that old yet. And I really like it here. I've lived in, Kansas and California and Hawaii and South Carolina, and Maryland is one of the places that has felt most like home to me because of the values that we have here. But I think it's also important to recognize that I am seeking to represent you, but I'm seeking to represent you in governing the whole country. And that's something that I think gets lost in the shuffle a lot. Because we are part of a whole. We're part of a United States of America. And that's really what the job is that we're trying to have. So I think it's important to represent the district, but it's also important to remember what the job we're seeking actually is. Thank you.
I moved to Prince George's County on August 1st, 1992. I lived in Largo, and since then I've lived within a quarter mile of Central Avenue for the last quarter century. Not only do I live in the 4th Congressional District, I represented in the state legislature, the 25th Legislative District, big piece of the 4th Congressional. And I know this is not a debate, but just to clarify the record, I've not only represented families in Prince George's and Anne Arundel, but Garrett County and Wycomico County, because I served as lieutenant governor, and it's been a real privilege. But it doesn't matter where people live, Wycomico, Garrett, Prince George's, 4th or 5th, we all want the same things for ourselves and our family: good schools, opportunity, clean environment, access to health care. That's true no matter where you live, and that's true for the people that we represent and that we serve. I'm proud of the communities, as I said in my opening, in the 4th Congressional District. We've got solid communities, we've got strong communities, but we got to strengthen those communities. How much time do we get?
You can reduce to share with you that we reduced it to the time.
Oh, because you told me a minute, so I had that 1 minute clock going, but I had an extra 30, but I won't prolong it. I love the 4th Congressional District.
A minute and a half is
what I would have told you. When I first got to Prince George's County, I went to Largo High School and I said, I want to be a member of the PTA. They said, well, what grade is your child in? I said, what child? I have no children. And I volunteered at Largo High School because I wanted to be a part of the fabric of this community. And I think our schools, and great schools, are central to the firm and strong fabric of the community. I love Prince George's County. I'm glad to be here.
Next question is for Mr. Glenn Ivey. To start, how would you protect Social Security?
Minute and a half? All right. Well, look, and I know we haven't been so partisan this morning, but you got to go partisan on this one for sure, because the Republican Party, which is getting crazier and crazier by the day. I mean, watch some of those debates. It is incredible what they say. And so some of the things that they're putting on the table, again, is privatization of Social Security. When I went to work for Congressman Conyers, in 1987, they were talking about privatizing Social Security. And even though we've seen the market go up and down, we've seen the big recessions and everything, they're still talking about privatizing Social Security. We've got to beat that. So far we've been able to hold it back, but there's no question that the Democratic Party is the key protector of the Social Security system, no question about it. And I think there's some things we need to do to expand it, to improve it. We've talked a little bit about the solvency piece. So for people making over $250,000, currently, I think it's $118,000, they stopped charging, taking taxes out for Social Security, no matter how much you make. Bill Gates doesn't pay any more for Social Security than a lot of you do. But we need to, I think, put the 250 in so we can make sure we have the solvency piece in place and protect Social Security in that way. And then at the other end of it, there's the challenge of just making it work, the constituent services piece. people come in all the time. You know, I get calls. I'm not in public office anymore, but I get calls from people just trying to figure out how to make things work. Social Security is one of those key constituent services piece where you can provide help to people on an everyday basis. Thank you.
Thank you. I will make sure that the age is not increased. I will make sure that the cap is lifted so those that earn more pay more, because it's not fair. And I will make sure that when you call my office and you need help in accessing those funds, that you're able to have those funds, that I help you with the application process. A lot of what we can do as a congressperson is make sure that government works for you, that we have relationships with different offices as well. And I will make sure that it's not privatized, because that's a mistake. In Maryland, a few years ago, we privatized the collection of child support. And guess what happened? We had to take it back because it did not work. So I will make sure that it's not privatized, that we lift the cap, that we don't increase the age, that we expand it and protect it. And lastly, that we spend some money on resources to make sure that we fight fraud so that we can protect it. Thank you.
A lot has been mentioned so far about lifting the cap on Social Security taxes, payroll taxes in general, and I agree with that. I think that if you have an income of $150,000, you should be paying a lower tax rate than someone who has an income of $118,000. That makes no sense to me. But another piece that I think could go a long way towards keeping it sustainable is start treating capital gains as regular income. Because for people who are out there laboring all day, they didn't earn that money any less than people who made their money on the stock market. And I don't think we should be forcing them to pay more taxes than people who make their money essentially gambling. So I think if we start treating capital gains as regular income, that will be a huge influx of money into the system. And additionally, we hear a lot of rhetoric about robbing the trust fund, and that's a little bit of, well, it's not accurate. I mean, it's no more, the trust fund has no more been robbed than you have been robbed if you take your money and you go out and buy savings bonds. The largest holder of American debt is not China or any private entity. The largest holder of American debt is the Social Security Administration. So I think that that's a piece of misinformation that I just wanted to clear up. I think that we can protect Social Security and expand it by increasing the amount of money that's coming into the system.
I don't think there's any daylight between any of us on this issue, so I'm going to sound very repetitive. I oppose privatization. I support increasing the payroll cap to $250,000. I oppose raising the age for retirement, something that you haven't heard, but I'm sure we all agree. On the CPI, and the reason why seniors didn't get an increase in Social Security is because the consumer price index that gives that COLA, that cost of living adjustment for Social Security, it's based on the urban earners CPI. That's wrong. It should be based on the elderly American CPI, the basket of goods that seniors buy. And if it were, then the seniors would have gotten a raise this year. So I'm going to fight to do that. Also, another thing that you haven't heard, but I got to imagine we all agree, is the lowest earners, that lifelong minimum wage earner, and there are a lot of them out there, who's going to rely more on Social Security than someone who's had a much higher salary for the course of their life and may have a pension and a 401k or something. I think that low-income wage earner, when they get time to collect Social Security, we need to give them a bump up. I've knocked on a few thousand doors this summer, talked to a lot of seniors in senior homes, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in single-family apartment houses, and what they ask about in addition to Social Security, affordable housing. What are we going to do to make housing more affordable? So I'm going to support increasing the low-income tax credit so that we can develop more affordable housing, which will bring down the cost of housing for seniors and working Americans.
Thank you. You all, in addition to that cap, you all, we got to create more jobs so more people are paying into Social Security. You all, I've been out extensively. It's one of the major constituency groups that I've focused on because I was raised by my grandmother in Alabama, and I know very firsthand, watching her and seeing her struggle with trying to make ends meet to provide for me through Social Security. And so we have to protect it at all costs to make sure that it's not privatized. We have to create jobs so more people are paying into Social Security. We do have to raise the cap, and the cap is $118,000. You don't pay anything above that, but you still pay at the $118,000 and less. But we also have to make sure that seniors, because Social Security lifts a lot of people out of poverty, our seniors and people with disabilities. We want to make sure that seniors get the resources that they need. Social Security, what I hear from seniors is they want rent control. That is a state issue, and we don't have any legislation to deal with rent control. Seniors want to be protected from predatory lending. They want to be protected from gimmicks and scams. And we are not doing that right here in our own district. We are working towards, and I applaud that. We want to make sure that we are protecting seniors at all costs because many of them live on their Social Security. But also we got to change the formula when it comes to supplemental nutrition and assistance programs resources. Thank you.
Ms. Pina Monique, what is your stance on the death penalty?
I actually, if I may, I voted in Maryland to repeal it. So I used to work, one of the jobs I had in my second year of law school was that I traveled to Alabama and I worked with the Alabama Capital Punishment Representation Center. Those of you that know Brian Stevenson, I've heard of him. He does great work. And I worked on the appeals for the inmates on death row. So in the state of Maryland, I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to vote to repeal it. So I co-sponsored it and I voted to repeal it. I got up on the floor and I fought to repeal it because when you look at the data, it is not applied the way it should be. There's a lot of disparity. There are a lot of people of color that are being put to death. All right, when you compare them to the white population. And also the fact that a lot of times they're not able to get a good lawyer, and that makes a difference when you're sentenced as well. And also prosecutorial discretion. There's studies that show that a lot of time prosecutors abuse that. So I am against it. Thank you.
I am also a strong opponent of the death penalty, although I probably have a slightly different line of reasoning to take me to that position. We do not have a 100% accurate justice system. We know that we convict innocent people, and we do it a lot more frequently than I would like. As Mr. Ivey said earlier, we have false confessions, and that's a real problem. And if you have the death penalty, you always risk putting an innocent person to death. And that thought that the state would kill someone who is guilty of nothing other than the justice system failing them is just terrifying to me. So although there are some horrific crimes that are committed, and we would really love, from a vengeance standpoint, to see them put to death, having that as an option, you are always risking innocent lives, and that's not a risk that's acceptable to me. Thank you.
There is inherent racism and racial injustice in the criminal justice system. Everything from traffic stops to the death penalty. Some of the consequences are irreversible, and that's a death penalty. It took us 5 years in the O'Malley Brown administration to finally repeal the death penalty. We introduced it in year one in a Democratic state, and it wasn't until year 5 or 6 we finally got it passed. I remember testifying, and a state senator asked me why, and I said, I'll tell you why. Because when you look around this country at what they call capital eligible cases, those are cases that could go to the death penalty, whether it's in Texas or Maryland or wherever the death penalty exists. 21% of those cases involve a black defendant and a white victim. But when you look at who's on death row, those that get convicted and sentenced to death, 60% black defendant, white victim. You talk about racial injustice. and racial disparities. We had no choice but to repeal the death penalty, and we finally got it done. And it's not just Texas and Virginia where there are problems. Calvert County, black man, 1980s, confessed to a crime he didn't commit to avoid the death penalty because he was being threatened with the death penalty. 8 years later, he's exonerated, not because of some technicality in the crime, but because they found the real defendant. White man, Bloodsworth, found guilty, sentenced to death. The real killer, 1 floor up and 2 cells to the right in the same prison. DNA, the first time it was ever used, or one of the first times, right here in Maryland, it exonerated him. The death penalty is horrific. The Supreme Court will have an opportunity when President Obama gets his new nominee through, and we're going to repeal it nationwide.
I oppose the death penalty, but I also oppose women dying at the hand of domestic violence perpetrators. In my mind, that's the death penalty. I also absolutely abhor our young black males getting mowed down by police in police brutality. In my mind, that's also the death penalty. I abhor women being raped and murdered by people that want to do them harm. In my mind, that's also the death penalty. And so let's make sure that we're looking at this from a broad perspective. I wish I could say that I knew what it felt like to have to deal with the consequences of someone that have to deal with a loved one being brutally murdered that would warrant the death penalty. I wish I could say that I could sympathize with that. And so I want to be sensitive that while I absolutely oppose the death penalty, I believe in very stiff consequences for people that would violate our seniors, our women, our veterans, people that would commit heinous crimes so bad that it shocks the conscience. And so I oppose the death penalty, but I also believe fervently in strong and stiff accountability.
When I was state's attorney, we had horrific murders coming through the county. We still do. We had police officers getting killed. We had babies getting killed from stray bullets from AK-47s. One of the cases I prosecuted personally, there was a drive-by shooting in front of a house. The guy they were shooting at, they missed. The bullet went into the house of the next door neighbor, came through her window, went through her head, killed her instantly. She was leaving one job, she was home changing to get dressed for her second job. So there's a definite desire to want to hold these folks accountable. But when I was state's attorney, I was watching these cases, the Innocence Project, DNA was coming forth. There were people who were on death row. They were about to be executed. Turned out they were innocent. And then here in the county, the cases I was dealing with, there was a double murder in Suitland Flower Shop. 2 grandmothers were killed over $13, right? So they come in to meet with me, and I said, well, what do y'all want to do? One family, we definitely want the death penalty, Mr. Ivey. The other family, I'm saved, I believe Jesus, so his judgment is up to him. So, rather than put the families in that kind of split, I was like, you know what? I think we need to move away from that. And so I went, actually, when the legislation was put up, they couldn't find a prosecutor in the state who would come and testify in favor of repealing the death penalty. So I stepped up and did it. I testified in favor of repeal, and I stood there with Ben Jealous of the NAACP and the local leaders, elected officials, and we got it done. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of having done when I was state's attorney. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last question for this particular section, and it'll be directed initially to Mr. Strait. If elected to Congress, which congressional committee do you think you could be most effective in representing your Maryland constituents?
That's actually a really difficult question.
Can you restate the question?
What committee do I think I would be able to best serve the constituents? The easy answer is the Appropriations Committee, because that's what everything kind of goes through. But aside from that, I think that I would like to do some work on to protect our environment as well, because that's something that affects everybody, and that I don't think that we have a strong enough voice in terms of making sure that we are leaving our future generations a planet that is going to be habitable. I mean, one thing that we hear is, oh, we're going to cut emissions, or we're going to limit we're going to limit warming to 2 or 3 degrees over the next century. But if you do that and you just slow it down and you have no real plan to stop it, then you're leaving your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren with a world that they can't live in. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody in any future generation living in a country where Miami's underwater, or living in a situation where we have these polar vortexes because the weather patterns are unstable, and so a storm on the West Coast has weather over here being 20 degrees below zero, because it's about the stability of our environment, and I don't think we're doing enough to protect that. So those are the 2 committees that I think that I would be able to be the most service in.
Look, I want to be on appropriations. I'm just going to tell you right now, I want to be where the money's at. Because the 2 things, and you've heard it from pretty much everyone on the stage, that we're all going to be fighting for is constituent services and bringing our fair share of federal dollars to the 4th Congressional District. I want to be on appropriations so that we can first of all, eliminate sequestration and restore federal funding to education. I want to be on appropriations to make sure, although the state of Maryland has approved the purple line, make sure that federal funding is securely in place. I want to be in appropriations to make sure that if we're opening up more community-based health clinics for veterans, that the money's there to actually build them and to staff them. So I want to be where the money's at, because I want to bring the money back home to Prince George County. But regardless of the committee I'm on, it'll all be about constituent services. With my experience, they may, because the member doesn't make the decision, maybe they'll put me on Veterans Affairs or Armed Services. Maybe they'll put me on Commerce and Infrastructure. So I've got a lot of experience in how to deliver infrastructure to a community. Maybe they'll put me on Education and Labor, because of the work I've done in expanding pre-K in Maryland, Board of Trustees at Prince George's Community College. So wherever I am, I'll serve you well, and no matter what committee I'm on, my focus will be constituent services to the families and small businesses of the 4th Congressional District. Thank you.
Because of my experience, I'm a retired colonel from the Army, 24-year combat veteran. I also oversaw business enterprise for the federal government, $57 billion in appropriations, contracts. I also have worked as the senior policy advisor in the Department of Homeland Security. The committees I want to serve on is on the House Armed Services Committee. Why? Our national budget is $4 trillion a year. The Department of Defense gets $1 trillion of that money. $1 trillion. I want to sit on the House Armed Services Committee so I can make sure that minority-owned small businesses get access to prime government contracts and they get a seat at the table. I was told a long time ago, either you're at the table or you're on the menu, and too many of our minority-owned small businesses have been on the menu. I have the experience to make sure that, and I understand how procurement and acquisitions work. I sat on those source selection committees. I also want to serve on the the Committee on Homeland Security. Why? Because it's another committee that gets a large amount of federal appropriations. You all, as new representatives, as a new representative in Congress, it will be incredibly hard for us to be assigned to the Appropriations Committee or the Ways and Means Committee. Those committees are set aside for more senior representatives. So it sounds good, nice rhetoric, but it ain't gonna happen. I want to make sure that I can be effective when I get there on day one. And I've served in the Senate. I've served as a congressional staffer in the Senate, on the Veteran Affairs Committee, on the Committee for Small Business, and on the Senate Armed Services Committee. So I understand where the money is, and I know how to bring it home.
Okay, so the committee, I think, that probably makes the most sense for me from the standpoint of being able to help is transportation and infrastructure. And that's because a lot of we're talking about infrastructure repair, schools, roads, and all that stuff. It goes through that committee. And so authorizing those kinds of funds is very important, and we could really make a difference with that. And by the way, I think the ranking member on that is also from Maryland, Elijah Cummings. So, that's the type of partnership you can form. We could work together as a delegation. So all of the members from Maryland can work together to help bring things back to the community. Another one, Judiciary Committee. Not only did I work on the committee when I was on Congressman Conyers' staff, but I've lived it. I was a federal prosecutor. I've been a state prosecutor. Criminal justice reform legislation is one of the few things that there's a chance to actually pass right now. There's a consensus growing between Democrats and Republicans. And for the reasons we talked about, the success we've had here in Prince George's County, not perfect, but ahead of a lot of the rest of the country, based on the things we did with prosecutions and policing, that would be a great place where we can make a difference. And then lastly, there's a subcommittee that deals with federal workers and veterans. I think that's one of those places. We have so many federal workers here. I was in the federal government. My father was. Federal workers they're not getting COLAs. They're not getting the types of raises they really ought to get and deserve. It's really time to make sure that we keep that push going and help those assistance happen. And then lastly, the small business community. I did work Small Business Committee. I did work on that committee as well. The Republicans were actually trying to eliminate the 8A program and the Minority Business Development Program. We helped to fight and push that back. We'll continue that fight and make a difference for those of us here in Prince George's.
Look, wherever I end up, whatever committee, I'm going to be the strongest progressive fighter for you. It's what I've done. Doesn't matter where I end up. I'm going to speak up. I'm not going to rubber stamp. I haven't done it for 9 years. I'm going to be independent like I've done for 9 years for you. Where would my experience be the most helpful? Probably in education and workforce. We have spoken a lot today about the need for jobs, the need to have a good education system, the need for the federal government and state government to partner, and the need for us to bring more resources. Also, where will my experience help? On health. I have 9 years of being on the health committee. As a woman, the only woman up here, I bring a diverse background that no one else brings. As people of color, we have a lot of disparity regarding health, our health. Whether it's heart disease, diabetes, obesity, I bring that experience. And I will be extremely effective because I've done it. And I want to be able to protect Obamacare. They have tried to repeal it more than 50 times, and we know it works. I will be fighting for you. I will be protecting it for you because I have the experience and I have the passion and the commitment. Thank you.
Okay, at this time we will have closing statements by our candidates. Since we started with you, Mr. Brown, at the opening, we will start with Mr. Straight and come from the right to the left. Sister Lynette, can you reconfirm, is it 1 minute for each closing statement? What is the time frame?
No, closing statement is 2.
Okay, 2 minutes. So you each get 2 minutes, and we'll start with you, Mr. Straight.
We have a lot of very qualified candidates up here with a very diverse set of life experiences and different things that we would bring to the office. I don't have as much in the way of legislative experience as some of the other candidates, but one thing that I do have as a strength is I'm a very quick learner and I have a love of knowledge. So whatever I end up doing in Congress, I'm going to do the research and figure out what the underlying problems are. Because I like solving problems. I always have since I was a little kid. So when I see a problem, I want to sit down and I want to find the root cause of the problem and figure out how I can fix that root cause. And that's something that I think I uniquely bring as a candidate, is that kind of perspective and my long-term view of the future, not just for what I can do in the next year or in the 2-year term, but what I can set in motion for decades in the future. And I believe that that's a voice that's currently missing from Congress, is that focus on the future and that willingness to look out for future generations. Not just in terms of, oh, what's the national debt gonna be for our grandchildren, because that's a very easy thing to talk about. But what kind of infrastructure are we gonna leave for our grandchildren? What kind of environment are we gonna leave for our grandchildren? What kind of educational system are we gonna leave for our grandchildren? And that's what I would like to do as your representative, is look to the future and see what we can do together to make our country stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to come here and address you. I really appreciate it. I think that these forums are important because you get to know us. You get to see our background, and you get to get a sense of our personalities and what moves us. Look, the truth is that we will be the minority party. Legislatively, we probably won't be able to do a lot. Can I legislate, which a congressman or congresswoman is supposed to do? Yes, I've done it at the state level. Do I get the issues intellectually about Social Security, healthcare, infrastructure, education, our tax code? Absolutely. But the bottom line, what is important is, what kind of congresswoman would I be for you? Do you have access to me? Absolutely. When you call my office, would I have great staff? Yes. Would I be responsive? Yes. Would I make government work for you? Yes. If you write about a bill, will I be able to tell you this is what the bill does? This is when the hearing is, you can come organize? Absolutely, because I come from grassroots. It is what moves me. Will you be able to say my congressperson attends our meetings in our community? Yes. She listens to me when I come up and I speak with her? Yes. That is the kind of person that you're going to get if you vote for me on April 26th. You have my word, because my word is my bond. And I've done it for 9 years. And I work hard. And I do my homework. And I've been effective, and I will bring that to the national level. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
I'm running for Congress because I want to fight for you on two different levels. One is the national level. We talked a little bit about the Republicans, but there's a giant struggle going on really for the soul of the country right now. And part of it will be resolved in this presidential election, but the forces that want to eliminate Obamacare, 62 votes to get rid of it, that want to privatize Social Security, that want to cut back on someone want to eliminate the Department of Education, much less give full support to schools, eliminate the EPA. We've got to fight all of that. President Obama has been an outstanding president. He's going to leave an outstanding legacy. I don't care what they say. They keep trying to talk him down and undercut him. Jump up and shout liar in the middle of the State of the Union address. The level of disrespect he's been subjected to is outrageous. That's a fight we've got to continue to fight, because when he wins those fights, he's winning for all of us. He's made a difference for us. Obamacare has been a huge development. Secondly, though, I want to fight locally, too. Constituent services is something I know, because when I worked on the Hill for Congressman Conyers, but especially Senator Sarbanes, because he represented Maryland. And so I know, because I had to do constituent service work. We did the letters, we did the outreach. I would come cover events for him. And I did it personally, too, when I was state's attorney. Each of the victims of crime that came through the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office, they got constituent services from us. And we had 20,000 cases a year. I know how to do constituent services, and I know how to make it work. So on April 26th, I asked for your support. Judge me based on the experience I've got from working on Capitol Hill, from the work I did as state's attorney. We didn't bring crime down by ourselves, but we were a big part of it, and we helped to make a difference. And judge me also by the programs we brought, the mentoring programs, the tutoring programs, the outreach through the faith community, using no tax dollars because we didn't have the money for it, but that they made a difference in the community. I ask for your support on April 26th. Thanks for doing this forum. Thank you, and God bless.
It sounds really good. Constituent services sounds really good right about now, right? I sure wish that child that was over at Forestville Military Academy that was molested by a suspected Prince George's County board member. I wish they knew what constituent services was about, because they didn't get it, because the perpetrator wasn't prosecuted. You all, Tip O'Neill said, all politics are local. And while we all want to jump on the bandwagon of President Obama, and I salute the president, and I love his steady hand when it comes to discharging national security and his responsibility as the commander-in-chief. I appreciate that. But look around our community. You all, why, after all of this time, why do we still have the poorest schools in this state? Why do we still lead the country in the highest number of foreclosures? Why do we have the highest recidivism rate amongst our black males? Why do our seniors not have a rent control legislation to make sure that they can truly live with dignity and respect? Why is it that we have infrastructure? You know, I told you I was raised in Alabama on my grandmama's farm, and we had a dirt road. I've replaced 3 rims and 4 tires. These roads are like driving on my grandmother's dirt road. Why is that? So think about it. It is time out for establishment politicians and career politicians. I believe in term limits, and I think that you need to go home after a while. You need to take a knee. I respect the service. I respect the efforts of the people that have served. But 16 years, that's a long time to have served. 8 years, 9 years, that's a long time to have served, and the results are still the same. So when are we going to be sick and tired of being sick and tired? When are we going to take back our political power? You all, I would ask you to please follow the money. Look at who's getting $5,000 checks from people. They're not going to be beholden to you. They're going to be beholden to those people that's writing those big checks. Look at the people that are getting endorsements. They're not going to be beholden to you. They're going to have to repay that. Please follow the money. Take back your political power, and let's stand together. Let's lock arms together, and let's go to Congress together and change our community for the better.
Thank you. Let me close not by telling you what I have done, and I invite you to go to anthonybrown.com, and we provide a lot of information about my record and my experience, the things that I've focused on, but more importantly, the work that I've tried to do in partnership with the community, with elected leaders, with community leaders on behalf of this great state and this wonderful county. So let me not close by telling you what I've done, but try to give you a little insight into why I run. 32 years ago, I received a commission in the United States Army as a second lieutenant. And I had the privilege of serving with men and women from all 4 corners of this country. They were different. We were different geographic backgrounds, ethnic, racial, faith. We were different. But we were bonded by our common love for this country. And we did a lot of things. We drove trucks and flew helicopters. We were cooks and medics and mechanics. And every so often, we let ourselves believe that we were part of something bigger than what we did on any given day. We were part of a noble calling, and that was public service. It happened to be military service, but it was public service. And I realized then in my life the power of serving others. So I had the privilege to serve as lieutenant governor. I had the privilege to serve as a member of the House of Delegates. And what I've seen through that experience is that what people need is a government that works for the people. We're never going to get it perfect, but we need to strive to make progress every day. We've made a lot of progress under the last 6-7 years of President Obama. And you've heard it. Save the economy, Obamacare, expanded Pell Grants, raised the conversation about the need to pass meaningful gun control legislation and immigration reform. And that's my commitment, not to protect a legacy, but to build on accomplishments. I can't do it alone. I need your support, not just to get elected. Certainly I need your vote, but together I need your support so that together we can do the important work that needs to be done on behalf of the 4th Congressional District. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank all of the congressional candidates who gave a bit of their time this morning, and certainly gave us a breadth of information that will help us in deciding who to represent us in Congress. We'd also like to thank everyone who's in attendance today for coming out on this chilly morning. Please be involved, get out the vote, go vote. Thank you.
Couple of closing remarks.
Just some closing remarks. There's some special people that I need to recognize. And again, thank you, candidates. But we had some sponsors that came forth. And the first sponsors and support, I'd like to bring up my members of the lay ministry of Greater Mount Nebo to help support me. So you all need to come stand up with me. Come on, hop along. I got two more coming. Trust me, you never can do anything by yourself, so you always have a great group of people that support you, and these are the lay members that have been very helpful. The next group I'd like to recognize, the Collective Banking Empowerment Group, or Collective Empowerment Group. Would they stand if they're still here? The Prince George's Chamber of Commerce. The president I know is here, and any members of the Prince George's County Education Association, please be recognized. We'd like to give them a special thanks because they are videotaping this event so that it will be on their link, so if you need to send some of the folks to see that. The Prince George's County's National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, are they represented here? And Prince George's chapter of League of Women Voters have been very helpful. Would you all stand and be recognized? Please stand. Thank you. I don't know if we have the owner of the Old Town Inn, one of the newest restaurants that's owned by an African American. He has a location in Upper Marlboro, the town, and in Largo. Not here. Okay, sorors that have been outstanding support. Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority chapters, please stand. Yes. Delta Sigma Theta sororities, please stand. Okay, and special thanks to the Greater Mount Nebo staff. I don't know if any of them here, but they were so helpful. Okay, and just to make you aware, you notice that this forum was all Democratic. Did you notice that? Well, we are having one for the Republicans, which will be on April the 9th here at the church from 9 to 11. So we'd like your attendance to that event also. And Miss Aretha Bridgewater is going to recognize any elected officials that are still here. Come on, babe.
Thank you, Lynette. I really enjoyed it, and thanks to all of the candidates. You did a great job. And I know that all of us learned something new today. And so some of the elected officials who were here left because, as you know, there's so much going on today. So I'm going to start with the chair of the Democratic Central Committee, Cheryl Landers. Would you stand and remain standing? Teresa Dudley was already introduced as the president of the Prince George's Educators Association, but she is also a member of the Democratic Central Committee. Thank you, Teresa. Lori Sales is representing Congressman Van Hollen. Thank you. We have some former elected officials. I saw former delegate Veronica Turner. Stand up, please. Now, the president of the Prince George's Young Democrats was here. That was Maurice Simpson, but I think he's gone now. I did see Delegate Aisha Brayboy. Is she still here? She was a delegate in the 25th Legislative District. I saw Floyd Wilson. Are you still here? He was the former chair of the Prince George's County Council. Is he here? And Beatrice Tignor was a former senator in the 25th Legislative District. I see she had a funeral. And then we have Jolene Ivey. Stand up, Jolene. Jolene was a delegate and also chaired the Prince George's delegation. Thank you. And now I see former Senator Gloria Lawler. And Gloria was also a former senator, but also she was the Secretary of Aging. Thank you for being here, and thanks for being a part of this process and helping us out. Thanks again, and thanks to Lynette. Reverend Weaver.
Thank you, candidates, so much for being with us today. Thank you, everyone, so that we can become an informed electorate. Amen. And again, don't forget the date, April the 26th. So let's make sure that everyone gets out and votes. Let's all stand. And I know this has been a candidates forum, but this is a house of God. So we gonna pray. Father, in the matchless name of Jesus Christ, Lord, we come before you again to say thank you. We're grateful, Lord God, for all that we have heard on this day. Help us, oh God, to become even better citizens by being informed of the issues that affect all of us. We're grateful, Lord God, for these candidates that have come forward today. Help us, oh God, to indeed live our lives in such a way where you will be well pleased with us. So God, even as we're being dismissed from this gathering today, we never want to be dismissed from your presence. Keep us and guide us in all that we do, and we will be so very, very careful to give your name the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. God bless everybody. Have a great afternoon.